Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. I'll start with the bad news. Trudeau is still in power, and Chrystia Freeland is as annoying as ever. Nothing's changed there, despite 3 hours of those guys sitting around in circle doing whatever a Liberal caucus does behind closed doors when a supposed revolution is getting going. But of course, we'll keep covering and watching that. Lots of other stuff going on. We've had the week of provincial elections, the last just a little more than a 1 week period. We'll have New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, and BC all having held elections. Saskatchewan's the last of the three. That's going to be this Monday, I believe. And Chris Oldcorn, our reporter out in Saskatchewan, is going to come on the show in a little while to talk about that. We'll break it down. Maybe we'll get a conservative type government winning one of these elections. There's only one left, so that's the one to hope for. Use that comment scroll, guys. Good to see you already in there. Tim, Dale, Mr. Stanley, Paradoxy, even Freedom Honey, and Kenzie Kraken. Just, keep the discussions going, throw the questions my way, and keep it civil. We can have some fun on a live show. It's a good thing. So I'm going to get going on what I'm ranting about this week, though, because I was pretty gobsmacked. I don't know why that surprised me anymore, but things still do. Right now, we've got an estimated 40,000 Indigenous children currently in the child welfare system. Yeah, that's not a typo, 40,000. And the nation's tied itself into knots, trying to apologize and compensate Indigenous people for the 150,000 children who attended residential schools over the course of a century. But think of that, we got 40,000 still in care right now. Since the 1990s, the attempted solution to every Indigenous issue is, of course, to pour more tax dollars into the system and hand money directly to chiefs and councils in the spirit of self-government. So far, that strategy's led to mass corruption, housing and water shortages, unemployment, poverty, people dying at younger ages. They're suffering from crime rates that make inner city levels look like peaceful and safe by comparison. And not only that, but the people in the reserves have become so socially and economically messed up that 40,000 of their children are now wards of the state. So what's the solution the government's proposing? Well, guess what? They wanted to give $47.8 billion to the Indigenous people for child welfare programs in the reserves. This is after the government already gave Indigenous people $23.3 billion just the other year to compensate them for having taken children into care in the past. Now, when you break all that down, it comes out to about $1.77 million for each and every Indigenous child in government care right now. Of course, these funds were to be managed by Indigenous reserves themselves, as they were supposed to take over the child welfare programs. What could possibly go wrong? Well, Indigenous chiefs from Canada across the country gathered in Calgary. We paid for that, of course, and sat around in the navel gaze to discuss what they're going to do with this latest waterfall of funds being offered to ease their social ills. They determined that the offer of nearly $1.8 million per child wasn't enough, and they rejected the offer. Yeah, they rejected it. Will it ever be enough? No, it won't. Decades of tossing funds at Indigenous reserves while never holding them accountable for the funds being spent has led to a class of entitled chiefs and advocates who have no concept of personal accountability and can't look at solving any problems beyond holding their hands out for more funds. They're never going to be satisfied, and they're never going to solve a problem. The problem is the racial apartheid system of reserves. We could increase funding to these reserves 1,000-fold. They'd still be enclaves of socioeconomic misery. There's no situation where we can separate a race of people, put them in isolated places, make them 100% dependent upon welfare, and have it work out for the residents of these places. Yet we keep trying. Much of the reason the residential schools were created over a century ago is because children were suffering horrifically on the reserves. A race and culture that had been living as nomadic Neolithic people only a couple generations before were suddenly crammed into reserves and expected to adapt to the modern living standards of the day. It was a disaster. And some people felt educating the children, through residential schools could bring them up to the proper health and help them integrate into modern society. Now, that didn't work out really well. We know that. But part of the reason was as soon as these kids graduated from residential schools, they went right back to the reserves. Well, what did you expect to happen? During what was called the 60s scoop, yes, this is a big one, 20,000 Indigenous children were taken into government care. It wasn't as if the government really wanted to take over the care of these children. They had to. The kids were malnourished and subject to abuse as reserve living had made life so dysfunctional parents couldn't raise their children any longer. The separation from their families was surely traumatic, but if they had remained in those households, they didn't face a very good future either. Ironically, if the government had left the children in those conditions, we'd be sued and blamed for neglect and having left them with their parents to be abused. Instead, the government took on the abuse, and they're more effective at it. Look, Indigenous leaders won't be satisfied no matter what we do. The common denominator in this whole affair over a century, though, is the reserve system itself. It's the elephant in the room that no politician has the balls to address. The reserve system's doomed to failure. And we haven't even begun discussing how to ease people out of it, much less start acting on it. How bad does it have to get? Are 40,000 kids in care not enough? The willful blindness to the root of the problem has led to proposed solutions which only exacerbate it. How could somebody look at this mess and think that moving more kids back onto the reserves while handing more money to chiefs and councils is going to make it any better? How many times you got to fail and keep trying that, guys? We're working to put kids back into the very situation that put them in the mess in the first place, and it's only going to get worse. We're never going to solve problems created by race-based policy through implementing even more race-based policy, but we keep trying. Either way, right now, yeah, the taxpayers are paying it, but the kids in the reserves are the ones paying the highest price right now. We got to get realistic with this. And yeah, when you can see chiefs turning down money like that, it's never enough, and it won't be. All right, well, that's what's got me wound up today to start things off. Let's see what else is going to get me all worked up. I got our news editor back, Dave Naylor, to tell me what else is breaking out there. How's it going, Dave?
Good. You were gobsmacked, eh? Gobsmacked.
Gobsmacked.
I love that word.
Yeah.
Gobsmacked.
Yeah. Get like the opportunities to use it now and then.
Exactly. I hear Jane was gobsmacked this week at the actions of a certain male mechanic.
Oh, yes.
She made the mistake of saying, well, I'll explain it to your husband when he gets here. Probably didn't go down well.
No, yeah. So I'll give a little background. Yes, Jane's my long-suffering wife, and she took a car in to get diagnosed with some problems and phoned to ask, well, what's the deal with it? And they wouldn't tell her. They said, it'd be better to explain it to your husband when you and him come here to get it.
Ouch.
Yeah, and they should understand. Jane knows more about cars than I do. I'm not a mechanically inclined guy. I can change a tire. I can check the oil. But yeah, that presumption sort of kind of got under her skin.
Did she make her feelings known at the mechanic?
No, but I doubt there'll be too many jobs going to that mechanical outlet anymore.
Exactly. Well, silly mistake, mechanics don't make it.
At least it wasn't me pissing her off for a change.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So speaking of people being pissed off, all eyes were today, as you mentioned, on the lead on Ottawa and the Liberal caucus meeting. There were reports going in that Trudeau may even resign. There was apparently more than 40 MPs that signed this you must go resignation. Turns out at the end of the day, only 24 MPs signed. And he smirked as he left the caucus meeting and said, we're strong and united. I'm not sure about that, but there you go. The UN actually released an interesting report today, something rare for them. They say that close to 900 real female athletes have lost medals to trans female competitors. Now, you remember that Algerian boxer, that monster guy who was beating up women? Apparently that's happened like in 900 different incidences over the few years. So kind of scary. We've got another fatal police shooting in Canada, Cory. This time it was in Penticton. Yesterday afternoon on the main street, police were called because of a guy waving a knife around. They arrived. They won't say what happened, but police ended up shooting him, and he died in hospital a short time later. So there's an investigation going on into that. Our real estate expert, Mike Thomas, has a look at the Bank of Canada jumbo interest rate cuts today. They cut it by 0.5 percentage point. So he explains what that means to mortgage holders and line of credit people. The Surrey Police Union came out this morning and attacked Justin Trudeau. A couple of days ago, he put out that ridiculous tweet on his handgun ban and how that's all cut down on crime and things are all fairy tales and unicorns. Well, the Surrey Police Union says they don't know what Trudeau was smoking, and they joined the Toronto Police Union in saying, no, it's not. Crime is getting out of control. Guns are coming in through the states, obviously, and it's not a good situation. And here's your shocker of the day. Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, was questioned by reporters on, hey, spending's out of control, the debt's going up, interest rate payments are getting to record amounts, billions and billions of dollars. And she says, oh, nothing to worry about, quote, we could spend even more.
Well, they'll probably try.
And they will probably try it. Look at those, that $1 billion figure you had in your monologue there. It's, their printing press on money is going 24/7.
And it doesn't work.
No. And it breeds inflation, right? And that's what we're trying to get under control.
Well, we're in for a rough ride yet until Prime Minister Hammerhead's out of there. I mean, just a note, you said he tweeted the other day, but a funny thing, while we were waiting for him to come out of his caucus meeting, I saw a tweet come from his account. Not a big secret that he actually probably doesn't run his own Twitter account. There's not nearly enough spelling errors.
Shocker.
But all the same, his comms people perhaps should reconsider some of the stuff they're putting out on his behalf. I doubt he even reads it either way.
Yeah, either way.
All right, well, a load of updates.
What's going on?
Well, I'll let you get back in to find some more stuff to keep everybody's hair going gray and worked up in the future.
Thanks, Cory.
All right, thank you, Dave. There's our news editor, Dave Naylor. I know you missed him last week, but he's back. He's here. He's keeping all those reporters running. Lots of stuff. The coverage is just breaking all the time, guys. It's busy out there. This when I nag you. This is how we pay the bills. This is how we stay independent. This is how we cover the stories that the legacy media won't. You know that the legacy media doesn't want to talk much about, oh, by the way, yes, hundreds and hundreds of women are losing in competitive sports to men. Men. We're not talking about, it's ridiculous. Somebody's got to cover it. Well, we do. The reason we can do that, guys, is because we don't answer to the government. We aren't afraid of their wrath, but you guys subscribe. It's $10 a month, $100 a year. Keeps us answering to you, keeps us keeping those stories going. So get on there, westernstandard.news/subscription. Take out a membership. Hey, Christmas is coming up. Buy somebody the gift of good news. You can subscribe on behalf of somebody else. Give them a gift. Give them a login. It's well worth it, and we appreciate it. We really do. It keeps us rolling. It keeps us covering these things. So if you've subscribed already, thank you very much. If you haven't, come on, guys, get on there and take care of it. All right, I was talking to Dave before the show a little bit, before we got going with that. The amount of ACERT, that's the Alberta Serious Incident something or other. Whenever there's a police shooting or something like that they're the ones who investigate to find out, if the police were out of bounds, which does happen at times, or if it was, just an act of self-defense or something like that. And a whole bunch of them just got cleared recently. So they've gone through, and these usually take a year or two to investigate. But the main thing was the volume, and then looking at the amount of cops and shootings going on right now. I mean, a recent one, a meth addict got shot because he'd been stabbing the police dog. And I do have more sympathy for the dog than the addict. I do feel for addicts. It's a huge problem. But when a cop has to shoot, they have to shoot. Let's hope to reduce that. But I'm just thinking, the volume, the amount we're seeing, as Dave just reported yet another one out in Kelowna. We haven't seen it like this before, but this is just an anecdote on my part. I'm just guessing, but I think it's got to have to do with the addiction epidemic, right? You can't reason. If it was a reasonable armed robber, even if it was a reasonable car thief, maybe they realize, you know what, I'm going to put my hands up. I'm going to go take my lumps, do what I got to do. But when you've got somebody strung out on a substance of some sort or another, they're not within control. They can become incredibly dangerous, especially with something speedy like methamphetamines. And it's leaving the police in a position with again, no other alternative but to use lethal force at times. It just highlights again further the addiction epidemic, though, how bad it is for everybody, for the officers, for the addicts, for the families, for people, again, being robbed by the addicts who are desperate. It's just horrific. We've never seen anything like this in at least people my age in my lifetime. And we always had addiction, alcoholics, some heroin addicts. Remember Inglewood, Calgary used to be nasty, but we're talking handfuls of people. Now it's everywhere. It's unbelievable. It's almost dystopian. Another thing that was been interesting, the rents in Alberta and Calgary actually came down a little bit. Maybe we're building houses faster. We're keeping up with things. But Dave mentioned too, a 0.5 point drop in the bank rate. That's a huge drop in one shot. And again, for people to write who can add a lot of knowledge and discussion on that, Mike Thomas, as Dave said, is working on that. He writes on real estate business, things like that. And it's fantastic. He'll break it down. Check it out. Get onto the Western Standard. See how these rate cuts are going to impact the real estate market. And the real estate market, of course, is a massive market that impacts all of us. So enough plugs for us. Well, actually, another way, I'm still going to pivot to another Western Standard person, but he's going to be talking about more specific things, and that's the Saskatchewan election, the last of the three in this 8-day period or whatnot. It's coming up this Monday. Let's see what Chris Oldcorn out there thinks we've got to look forward to. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining today.
Thank you very much for having me, Cory.
So you're coming down into the tail end of, chasing these guys around. I guess it was kind of a short formal campaign. They went just that straight 28, 27 days or whatever. But I know when you're really watching one closely, you really start looking forward to the final end of it, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been super quick. Also, at the same time, we're in the middle of the municipal elections as well that are coming up on November 13th. So to say that some corners are pretty crowded with election signs would be the understatement of the year.
Yeah, it's funny. It made me think of that. I think I posted pictures of it before, and I've gone down to the U.S. during local election season, and they elect everything down there. I mean, your local coroner, your dog catcher, the state controller, whatever. But
Even the judges.
oh yeah, and you get to a busy street corner, and it's just a vomit of signs. I don't imagine anybody can really actually take a moment to look at them, but everybody's got to try and get their word in. So right now, anyways, you've got a provincial one coming up this Monday. I guess to start with, advanced polls are a new thing that have really gotten big. Has there been a lot of advanced voting in this one?
Well, there's been a lot of promotion of advanced voting in this one. They actually have more places for advanced voting than they do on voting day, which is an interesting situation. It used to be like if you wanted to vote early, there was only a couple spots, and now it's the complete reverse here in Saskatchewan. Scott Moe posted a picture of him voting yesterday. Obviously, I think we know who he voted for. But yeah, the advanced polls are open. However, Election Saskatchewan has not released any information on how busy the advanced polls actually have been.
Yeah, so there's no atmospheric river anticipated to come on Monday and keep everybody from getting out on the final voting day. But so, I mean, I guess we'll start into the, prognostication. What have been the top issues, I guess, in this campaign? Like people are watching across the country. It's been kind of flying under the radar for most Canadians, I'm afraid. But, what's been standing out? What are the key issues this time?
Well, the NDP has really been harping on healthcare and saying that they would do it better, that somehow they would hire magical physicians and nurses that don't exist into the system and make them want to live in, rural Saskatchewan. This is a problem that's being faced by every single province across this country with regards to healthcare recruitment. There is no magic bullet here. It's going to be a long period of time. The Sask Party, actually, when they were in government, they've increased the amount of spaces for healthcare jobs in the province, in both the colleges and the universities, to try and make up for that. But and it was significant increases. They've increased the amount of RNs they're training by 50%, and they're still increasing it more as we go into future years. But the actual main issue in this election started last week, and that is parents' rights again. And that happened with the Belgoni Elementary School, where there was biological boys, two of them that are twins, changing in the grade 7 girls' changing room. We published that as an exclusive last Wednesday, and obviously the mainstream media went crazy with that. Apparently, I apparently hate trans kids and all this other stuff, which is completely untrue. But the mainstream media spent 5 days on this story, and it sucked up all the air in the room.
Well, and the other nuanced kind of aspect of that, it turns out that those two trans children were the children of an NDP MLA.
That's correct. Yeah, one that was elected in by-election in 2023. So he'd only been in for a little bit over a year. So, but yeah, they ended up, and there was posts online of him with his family. I mean, he essentially had outed himself anyways, because he had pictures online posted of him and his transgender children. We got blamed for it, but I mean, the truth is it was all out there as a rumor. We cleared it up because that's our responsibility. However, when we did the story, we didn't know that it was a Sask NDP MLA's kids.
Yeah, well, he did campaign and other strange stuff. I guess aside from that, coming in, a campaign office, it looked like it may have been shot at. It turns out it wasn't. Something had happened with the Sask Party headquarters there?
Yeah, one of the campaign offices in Northeast Regina, they arrived yesterday morning specifically, with two rather large holes in the glass in the front of the campaign office. When it was originally investigated by the police, at first they thought it was bullet holes. However, after they further investigated, they found some rocks inside. So it probably came from a pickup truck with big wheels that shot the rocks backwards as it was driving out of the strip mall parking lot where it was located.
Must have been spinning those wheels pretty hard there.
Trying to get out of that parking lot fast, apparently.
Well, I mean, it's good that there's not somebody shooting things up anyways, as insane as things get. We just don't need that. It's bad enough.
Yeah, and the other thing connected to that was that specific candidate had a bunch of his signs stolen as well, and vandalized. So there was the obviously concern that when you show up and you see what look like bullet holes, to treat it as they were bullet holes and make sure that your campaign staff are safe and so on, and the police got involved. So.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there's always crazy people. Way back when we had the Wild Rose Party, and they were actually hosted in offices that I lent to them. This is going back a ways, and Paul Himman won a by-election that really upset the left in Calgary. We came back to our office, and our windows had been smashed, and somebody had spray painted on the steps, "Are you really innocent?" It was kind of bizarre and very discomforting for people working in those offices. Like, some people just kind of lose it in these elections sometimes.
Yes, unfortunately, that happens to be the case sometimes. And luckily, in this scenario, and what happened, it was just a couple of rocks that went through the windows, and it wasn't bullet holes. I mean, there's a sense of relief there that this election hasn't gotten to that level of intolerance between the two sides.
No, so I see one of our commenters asking the big question. He's got his fingers crossed in the symbols there in the comment scroll, says, I'm crossing my fingers that Saskatchewan doesn't go NDP. I mean, this race is looking tighter than the last couple of races have looked for the Sask party. What do you think? Is there a chance the NDP could be taking power here this Monday?
No.
Okay.
There was a poll that came out a couple days ago by Insightrix. If you look on 338 Canada, Insightrix polls get the lowest rating of any poll done in the province of Saskatchewan. Could be because it's a company run by former NDP staffers, so they might be slightly biased. And actually, I didn't bother even doing a story on that poll because I basically kind of looked at how they did it, and it was, as someone who has worked in polling in the past, I can see why 338 treats Insightrix polls differently than, let's say, Angus Reid, for example. That poll did have the NDP up 50-45. However, when 338 inputted the data into their projections, the Sask party seats actually went up one. So they actually went from 38 to 39 seats. I've been saying for quite some time this is probably going to be around 38 seats for the Sask party, and low 20s for the NDP. Anything over 25 for the NDP, I think, is super hopeful on their part, but there's no way they're going to get to the magical number of 31. They just don't have a path there because a lot of their supporters are just stuck in Saskatoon and Regina. They are projected to flip some seats in Regina and a couple in Saskatoon, but the Sask party is still going to be holding on to 4 or 5 seats in Saskatoon and a couple in Regina. And then obviously their strongholds are in the rural areas as well.
Yeah, I mean, the urban-rural, demographics are a big factor in Alberta and, well, pretty much everywhere. That's where we're seeing a lot of differences in views, and it depends on how your seats are balanced impacting the elections. So if indeed, though, say there is a reduced majority for the Sask party, do you think over the long run, I doubt they'd get the pitchforks out right away, but there might be pressure to kind of start moving somebody else into the head rather than Scott Moe?
Yeah, I mean, we saw this back in 2017 with Brad Wall. Basically, they gave Scott Moe about 2.5 years before he had to go to the polls in 2020 as leader. And if it's below 38, 40, that sort of magic number they've been at, and we also keep in mind that the amount of ridings is now 61 as well. So it's a little easier to actually get the 40. We could see Scott Moe maybe bow out, being premier in maybe a year and a half, something like that. If they're below 36, then I think the pitchforks will come pretty fast. But if they're in the high 30s to 40 maybe, I don't think you'll see pitchforks quickly coming for him, but definitely probably in the next 18 months. That gives the new leader 2.5 years to stand in front of the mic and talk to people before they have to go back to the polls in 2028 for another mandate.
Another factor is, or maybe a non-factor, the alternative conservative type parties. You got Sask United, Buffalo Party. I mean, Sask United, they have incumbent MLAs or did. Potentially, they could take a pretty decent bite out of a couple of constituencies. Do you think they're going to have much of an impact then?
I think they will take a bite out of a couple, absolutely. Nadine Wilson in Saskatchewan Rivers, extremely popular. She was in with the Sask party for basically 2 decades in that seat. So she's very well known. And then you also have John Romick, who is the leader now of Sask United. He's running in Lumsden Morse, and he, in a by-election last year, in only 4 weeks after being announced as a candidate, took approximately 22.5% of the vote. That seat has always been viewed as a very safe seat for the Sask Party, and the fact that he was able to get that percentage of the vote in only 4 weeks was obviously a concern for them, and probably one of the drivers on why they dealt with those Lumsden sex cards and other things that came out with the Parents' Rights Act back in the fall when they used the notwithstanding clause. And they have another day one now. Scott Moe has said that his first thing he's going to do is direct the Minister of Education to do a ministerial order that changing rooms are for the biological sex only. So we could be lining up for another contentious parents' rights battle here in the province, even after the Sask Party is elected.
Yeah, well, those battles are happening all over the place. I mean, some people are attributing the New Brunswick win, though, to the conservative, for the Liberals, to the conservative stance taken by the former premier of New Brunswick when it came to these trans issues. I don't know. It's just getting absurd when we're talking the fringe of kids who used to be emos who now want to play dress up on other genders as they go through puberty. And we've actually turned these into election-defining issues. The world's gotten into a strange place, Chris.
Yeah, and if you look at, for example, New Brunswick versus Saskatchewan, federally speaking, this entire province is blue. As a matter of fact, we vote conservative here more than Alberta does. Saskatchewan is actually the most conservative province. Even Saskatoon and Regina that go orange in provincial elections, they go solid blue in federal. So there's a little bit different voting electorate here than there is in New Brunswick that has been, basically a Liberal stronghold federally off and on for, decades.
So the NDP, of course, they're surely running to win. They're hoping to all the same. You have to. If they come in and, that strong second opposition role, though, will they be satisfied with their leadership in that? And are they going to be stable as a party at that point going forward?
Well, Carla Beck will be the first leader to get above the 20 mark since they were sent packing in 2007. So anything above the 14 seats that they have now is a gain for them. Getting into the low 20s is a major electoral gain compared to where they have been in the past, because they were at 12, and then the two of the three by-elections last year, they won seats and converted them, so they got up to that 14. So if they can get up to 22, 23, they'll be a much louder voice in the legislature. However, they have absolutely no control because we are essentially a two-party system here. So someone has to get to that magical 31 number. And once you do, there's nothing the opposition can do other than kick and scream and complain, which is what they've been doing since 2007. That will probably continue. The one problem Carla Beck's going to have is that a lot of her MLAs are activists for various different causes. And that's going to cause problems behind closed doors when she has to try and make all of them happy with whatever they're going to attack the government on each day, because they are all going to have their own political agendas going in there, whereas Moe doesn't have to deal with that issue.
No, they've got unique challenges. That's one of the things with the NDP trying to maintain. I mean, they've had a better, success rate of maintaining unity with divisive internal things than conservatives, because the conservatives like ripping themselves up fast. I mean, they've got to deal with the labor front. They got to deal with the socialist front, who can put a lot of labor out of work if they shut down projects. And then they got to deal with the woke front, which is a bunch of activists who are often on the fringe, who upset, again, the blue-collar lunch pail union folks. And they got to keep them all under one tent. But they're pretty good at doing that. I got to give it that. They get crack-ups now and then, but they hold it together.
Yeah, I think this will be the first time that the NDP might not change their leadership going to the next election. I think you'll see Carla back in 2028, because no matter any way you slice this election, she's going to win at least 6 to 8 more seats for sure than what they already have now. And that is a massive seat upgrade from what they have now. We're talking about Carla Beck is the first leader they've had in a while who is actually personable. I was at a previous campaign issue, well, not campaign stops, but and the former leader, Ryan, I went to a couple of his events. He's a he's an okay speaker at the front, but then he didn't mix with people. Like, he never walked around the room and talked to people and shook their hands. Carla Beck is the exact opposite of that. She will shake everybody's hand in the room, kiss every baby that she possibly can. And they've just not had that. And so I think Carla Beck's personality is actually helping the NDP substantially, because she's interactive, whereas their previous leader was not.
Well, they've got upward momentum, so they'd be foolish to get rid of her in the next period. Of course, politics, people love doing foolish things and shooting themselves in the feet. So we'll wait and see. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll be watching as Monday approaches, and I'll see you on the pipeline in a little while too, I believe, today.
Yeah.
And thanks. So looking forward to your continued coverage and seeing how it all shakes out there in Saskatchewan, Chris.
Thanks, Cory.
All right. Thank you. So yeah, be sure, guys, get on there. Chris Oldcorn, for all things Saskatchewan, not just the election. He's out there, he's covering things, and as you can see, he's breaking it down for us, because we can watch things from outside, but you got to be inside to get a good feel or an idea of what's going on there. And that's why it's important, again, to have these reporters in different regions voting, or reporting, not voting, though I imagine he votes from those regions. So yeah, elections, again, I just as a side note, because Mr. Stanley, commenter, brought up something that's always been a bit of a pet issue with me, having worked on campaigns in the past and everything. When we talked about campaign signs, is how many people's votes are influenced by the senseless signs. And I quite strongly agree with you, but I will break down a little bit, because, I talked to somebody a little while back who was asking advice because they were thinking of running for office. I was thinking, boy, there's really not much outside of the party system for good training for people to do that and everything. But I'll tell you what. Signs on campaigns are grossly overrated. It's not to say they're completely unimportant or that you shouldn't have them. They're just overrated. I tell you, one of the most fun parts of a campaign, if you're a candidate or a volunteer, is the day when you get all those nice shrink-wrapped signs showing up, those bright colors, and you're ready to get out there and get the name of your campaign and candidate out on the streets, and you eagerly do so. But they're very expensive. They take a lot of time to get distributed. Now, there's different types of signs. I just, I'm going to go into this a little for people with politics as to why they're going out and how they're going out. There's the signs that go on people's front lawns on private property. Those signs are important for a few reasons. They can have an impact on neighbors. People tend to go with the flow. They move as a herd. And when they see Larry and Beth next door on each side of their place have gone with such and such a candidate, even unconsciously, they might look and say, yeah, maybe I'll just kind of jump and lean that way. It shows some momentum. The other part is, if it's a completely unknown candidate, yes, it gives some name recognition to get that out there so people see who's running. But seeing who's running doesn't influence very often how somebody will vote. Just because they saw the name, it'll increase the chances a little bit. Then you get the public area signs, and that's where signs get abused and foolishly used. People just splatter them everywhere they can. As I said, when you see those corners where they're just jammed with 50 signs, those have no influence on anybody. But they get vandalized constantly. You got to fix them up all the time. You see the stupid tricks and games played between campaigns, or, oh, this guy's got a sign and I'm going to stick 3 signs right in front of his sign to upset him. And it's just silly games, because I tell you what, when you've got 28 days to try and convince as many people as possible to vote for you, and if you're dedicating hours and hours a week to fixing signs and playing sign games and doing all that, you're wasting very precious moments. I one campaign I worked on, I was managing, and then the candidate would come in and he'd have a list of signs he saw down while he was driving out to go door knocking for the day. Very hardworking, excellent candidate, but he was letting it take up that much space in his mind that he couldn't help it but have this list and worry about signs that were knocked down and make sure we got somebody out there to stand them up and fix them. So yes, the signs are important, but not as important as some think. Get them on the lawns. The other thing is, getting them on those lawns forces your candidate, or at least volunteers, to door knock, because you have to ask permission. You've got to get, that's the effective campaigning. Go to the door and talk to people. Don't stick a whole bunch of signs in a city park. Get out there and meet people. That's how you change votes. That's how you gain votes. That's how you build your database and voter ID and knowing who's where. But those ones when you're splattering them all over, and of course you always notice at the end of the campaign, that's when the campaign office is suddenly, okay, we've still got 200 signs left. They'll send some volunteers out just to stick them anywhere and everywhere they can, because, well, they're not doing any good sitting around in the back of the campaign office anymore. fine, but it's just that much more to clean up at the end of the campaign. Makes no difference to anybody, but that's why in those last couple of days, you'll just see streets lined with hundreds and hundreds of campaign signs. So again, are campaign signs important? Yes and no. Not as important as some people think they are, but they do have a bit of an impact. Paradoxically saying, I find the destruction of each other's signs abhorrent. Absolutely. And there's one other thing with the targeting. I'll just throw one more tip out for anybody running a campaign, if they're a candidate or volunteering. Never, ever, ever, ever lay your hands on an opponent's signs. Even if you're standing one up on their behalf because it got knocked down with a bunch of yours, a volunteer of theirs could be across the street taking a picture, and a picture won't show if you were standing the sign up or if you were the one tearing it down. The gotcha games in politics are endless. And if it looks like your people were taking part in the vandalism of other signs, you're going to get a whole bunch of, again, distraction and headaches and look badly. And I know people say, well, that sign was illegally placed. Fine. Call bylaw enforcement to get them to deal with it, but never, ever, ever touch their signs, even with the best of intentions. Look at Saskatchewan. I meant to ask Chris about that. There was an NDP candidate who it looks like, and it was the same as George Chahal in Calgary, the federal Liberal MP, was actually door knocking, pulled out the piece of literature from another candidate and took it and put in his own. Stupid, 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 stupid. And pointless. It's not changing any votes. And it sure embarrassed the heck out of himself, as well as Chahal. That move by Chahal, he would have been in cabinet if he hadn't done that stupid porch pirate thing. He would have. But, you know, because you only have 2 Liberal MPs and Trudeau needs to try and show balance across the country, he would have put Chahal in some sort of junior portfolio. But once he was caught stealing mail, he still won his seat, but he didn't get any positions afterwards. And I doubt he's going to maintain that seat. So either way, there's my little campaign tips for the day, guys. Yeah, it gets frustrating. So New Brunswick now, of course, BC held their election. That was Saturday. We covered all that. You know, Jared's been fantastic on that. Still kind of waiting on the recounts. I suspect looking at things, we'll see. But, you know, there's a lot to be mail-in ballots and advanced ballots and things still to be recounted and checked and so on. But I don't think it's going to swing. So you've got, and this isn't the first time they've had this kind of balance. It's going to be NDP with the Green Party holding the balance power, right back to where they were a few years ago. And wagging the dog. It's going to be a shaky minority. We'll see how long that lasts. I figure at least a couple of years. There's no way that the Conservatives and the Greens are going to get together to make a coalition. So it'll be NDP. Certainly a humbling for the NDP. And even though, you know, second place sucks, you were hoping for the best, you thought you might win. The momentum shown by Rustad and the Conservatives from a party that was pretty much non-existent a couple of years ago to becoming that close to forming government and now having a very, very strong opposition, well-positioned to be the next government, given the chance in an election. It's a big victory for them in that sense. And he's got a lot to hold together, though, a lot. I mean, this is a party that was cobbled together fast. They don't have the long structural basis to hold themselves together. And, again, Conservatives, we love to infight and we love to get going on stuff like that. Speaking of that, so in Alberta, we got that AGM coming up. It's going to be November 2nd. It's in Red Deer in the middle of Alberta for the United Conservative Party. Over 6,000 people coming out to it. It's just astounding for a provincial annual general meeting. It's amazing. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of intrigue, a lot of speculation. We're going to be there covering it, of course. We can't pass up on that. But the leadership review for Premier Smith, some people think there's going to be a big push. There's certainly, and they got upset with me, but I'll call them that again, chronic malcontents, the same old, because I see those faces year after year. I've been seeing them 20 years and messing around in politics in Alberta, 30 years. God, I'm getting old. But it's the same people who, they support something until they don't. And usually they can't make it more than 6 months. Oh, that's it. They ticked me off. I'm out. We're going to demand this person resign. We're going to rip them down. We're going to pull them down because they prefer pulling things down rather than building them up. The UCP is far from perfect. Oh, God knows. I mean, again, I was on the board with Premier Smith when she was the head of the Wildrose Party and made one of the biggest political errors in Canadian history. I know she's capable of mistakes. But the foolishness of at this point, a couple of years into her mandate, when she's got a majority government, to try and rip her out of there is just ridiculous and it's foolish. Go to the AGM, express your concerns. Let her know what you think. Let the board know what you think. But to vote to remove her as leader, I don't know. To each their own. It's their thing. I don't think she has much to worry about. We've talked about that in the pipeline. It's a lot of money to attend this AGM. 6,000 people, amazing. I think it's like $300 a head now. If you're missed all the early bird pricing, it's still at least a couple hundred. You got to go to the central part of the province, find a hotel room, or stay with a friend. I don't know. I just can't see, because some people say, oh, the left is buying votes and they're going to get people out there and everything to take care of this. Again, out of 6,000 people, how much money and organization and everything would you have to do to really have much of an impact on the leadership review when that's what you got to do? I just don't see it. But we'll find out. We'll be there. So that's not long from now. Lots of political intrigue and things to keep us going. As Dave mentioned earlier, speaking of which, there's that difference between liberals and conservatives. Trudeau, we watched it in the newsroom all this morning, went into his caucus meeting for 3 hours. I mean, there was supposed to be that letter from so many caucus members saying, please, Justin, resign because our chances of getting reelected are pretty much nil. And they all came out. And yes, Trudeau came out with his usual smirk, though it's funny. He was walking in a darned hurry past the press with his planted on smirk. We're strong and united, and just stomped away. And then every barking little liberal seal, and that's what I'll call them, because they got no brains. They do what they're told. They're scared to stand up for themselves. They all came out and said the same thing. We're strong and united. We're strong and united. We're strong and united. Obviously you aren't. Not when you had to be coached to have a 3-word response to everything the media says. They're afraid of letting you even speak. You're wimps. Liberal members of parliament are wimps. So this is the other side of the coin, I guess, from what I was talking about with chronic malcontents who are looking to rip down a new leader who's ascendant and doing okay, versus a caucus of people willing to swirl the toilet because they can't find the courage to stand up to a leader who's years beyond his best before date, who is going to get them obliterated in the polls, and still, obviously, they got chewed out and shouted down in the caucus meeting and threatened and God knows what. And they've all come out strong and united. You're clowns. Meanwhile, the House of Commons is crippled because the Liberals are trying to cover up corruption with refusing to release documents, unredacted documents. So they haven't been able to get any business done in the House of Commons. There's a lot of rumors that Trudeau's going to prorogue the House of Commons soon because they're stuck. And that's just a Westminster tool where basically the Prime Minister could shut things down. Stephen Harper used it before as well, when it looked like the NDP and the Bloc and the Liberals were all going to get together and basically not punt his minority government out. He prorogued Parliament to take away the opportunity for them to do that, which I was a Harper supporter, and I think it was good for us. But I think it's an ugly, ugly tool for a government to be able to use. And Trudeau might use that pretty soon. We'll see. It's Lane or Ian, I can't tell what the capitalization of commenter that hit all, saying this is the effect of UBI, universal basic income. Sorry, folks, socialism still doesn't work. Okay, I'm not sure where that's popping out of, but it's a good subject to hit on quickly because people also think that there might be a big policy announcement or something, a Hail Mary throw, something desperate out of the Liberals to try it then. If they're not getting rid of Justin, what are we going to try to do to turn this around? Universal basic income is something they floated a lot. I don't think that's where they're going to come from, but you never know. And that is, basically, well, it's like it sounds. It's going to be a welfare program for everybody, a massive move towards outright full socialism or even a bit of communism. And as was said, it doesn't work and it won't work. But we could sure cost a fortune trying. And the financially illiterate, such as Chrystia Freeland, could very well try it. I mean, again, she still thinks we can spend our way further. Let's see, BC saying, I'd encourage everyone to stop earning. The tax system's communist. And most people are paying 50% of their income to the government. I understand that, but defunding the government also means defunding yourself. And when the sheriff comes to kick you out of your house, you might win on a point of principle, but you're going to end up in with a shopping cart and a tent on a corner somewhere. I understand people saying stand up to the government, don't pay your taxes, do things like that, or quit working, but it's just not a realistic option for most. We got to keep fighting. We got to break the system. Got to change the system. That all comes back to, I wrote a book on it already, guys. You can look that up if you like, want to Google it, but the system itself needs to be changed. Right now, we're just keep slapping new paint on a broken down system. That's why, as I was saying, when we get these ridiculous games of proroguing government and stuff like that. Paradoxically, shout out to Silver Core Outdoors. Their YouTube channel has a long form interview, with Alberta's Chief Firearms Officer, Terry Bryant. And yeah, Terry, she's fantastic. And she's the firearms officer for Alberta. And she's been there for a couple of years now in that role. She's been here as a guest a couple of times. Fantastic working on that. And I'll let you in on a secret. She's trans. So that's fine. Good. You know, absolutely live, be happy, be trans. She's not out there trying to go into change rooms or influence children or doing anything else. She's sticking to her mandate as a firearms officer, and she just happens to be trans. Good for her. I have no issue with this. It's the activists that are the nuts, guys. And boy, they're effective and they're nuts. So stand up to them, push back. We got Shane Wenzel saying Canada needs a full review of the Tax Act. Yes, that's another one, a big one. I mean, if we're not talking about stopping paying taxes, at least we could try to review and reform how we're paying it. I'm assuming Poilievre is going to get in with a majority. The next question will be, how much is he going to want to shake things up in that first year or two while he's in there? He said a couple of things that sound good, but it's going to be a lot of pushback. Is he really going to get in there and gut some things and really change them heavily? I sure hope so. He's a careful, smart politician. So I could see him hedging some bets and not making some changes in areas that I'd like him to, but we'll see. That'll be up to him and his strategists. For now, the first thing is we got to get rid of the nutcases who are in there right now, get an election so we get the chance to try and change it. And it looks like Justin Trudeau is determined to hang in there as long as humanly possible. Crazy. We will see. All right, we'll break more of that down tonight on the pipeline with the panel with Derek Fildebrand and Nigel Hannaford and myself. And again, get to the Western Standard. Linda Spodian's been great putting her stuff up there. Lots of other reporters and columnists. Keep tuning in, guys. Check in next week at this time. We'll report on what happened in the Saskatchewan election and, of course, everything else that's been going on in the week since then. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in a week.